a new trend pop up that has to deal with showing people your face on the internet. And I kind of want to talk a little bit what I think about the implications of this kind of like face reveal meta that we're getting, potentially some open questions in the futures with the VTubers, and the idea of what's going to happen if people use their face as an asset, as a biometric asset, what we get to with deepfakes and things like that. And I kind of just want to address a few of these topics because I find this face reveal thing on the internet to be pretty interesting. So let's start here. The internet loves face reveals. It seems that like face reveals have become a really popular concept because people like to know the identities of the people that they're watching on the internet. And the thing is that this is really rational, right? Like people like to know who they're talking to. They like to know that they're talking to a person that they can trust, and a face is a great way to establish said trust. However, with the face reveal that was just took the internet by storm, Dream, we learned that there is a perhaps right way and a wrong way to do a face reveal. The first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to face revealing is actually just this reaction mashup to fake face reveals from anime. Some of my favorite anime in here included are Demon Slayer. So we're just going to watch other people react. So this is a react to a reaction of how other people respond to seeing faces of people behind masks and what that does to people's psychology. So we can use the media extended player in Obsidian to actually play it in real time, which is really exciting within Obsidian. This is a plugin in the Obsidian community plugins. I think it's playing at 2x speed. It is playing at 2x speed and it's slowed down to normal.
Okay then.
So we can see here that in this clip that we're just watching right now, the main character Tanjiro is slashing at the mask of this person, this mysterious person who's been helping train him to go and fight demons. And pay attention to the people's expressions as this person's face is revealed, because I think that'll go a long way of kind of showing, not telling, the experience of a face reveal for individuals who watch face reveals on the internet.
Okay.
You get to see his face. He's interesting.
So face reveals are interesting because humans put a lot of stock in a face, right? A face is actually something that we pay attention to from the very first day that we're alive to the very last day that we're alive. We see faces in toast, for example. A human can see a face in pretty much any object. And the reason for that is that faces are just something that we're naturally attuned to look for at a very young age. For example, from this book so the book is called From What Every Body Is Saying, and it's a book about human body language by an FBI agent named Joe Navarro. I read this book a few years ago, so I actually just lost the title. This is the book that we're talking about, What Every Body Is Saying by Joe Navarro. When used bilaterally, these effectively pull the corners of the mouth sideways but cannot lift them upward, as is the case with the true smile. See figure 73. Interestingly, babies several weeks old will already reserve their full zygomatic smile for their mothers and utilize the rhizorius smile for all others. I don't know how to say this word. If you are unhappy, it is likely that you will be able to smile fully using the zygomaticus majoris and the orbiculus, these real words, orbicularis oculi muscles. Real smiles are difficult to fake when we have a sincere lack of emotion. The thing that I want to point out about this is that babies several weeks old will already reserve their full zygomatic smile for their mothers. I think that, to me, this kind of really hammers home the point of how important faces are for people to establish trust with other human beings, and how important it is to be able to see someone's face to say oh, I can trust this person or I can't trust this person. And I think that this has to do with why the internet is so fascinated with face reveals, because in the real world, you have a face. You can't avoid having a face. But on the internet, you can choose to be faceless. You can choose to be pseudonymous. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later as it comes to safety and vulnerability amongst strangers, as well as being recognized in public. So what does this have to do with the current era of intentional or accidental face reveals, right? People who produce content on the internet now know that their face has a amount of currency attached to it, a level of mysterious allure of what does this person look like? I can't put a face to this voice. I want to be able to put a face to this voice because it's really important to understanding the whole personality of a person and know if they are being truthful or if what they're saying is recorded or anything like that. And again, I think that this is a particularly interesting problem when it comes to network effects on the internet, because in real life, again, you can't avoid having a face. People will see your face regardless of what you do, and you can't really put away your face and hide your emotions fully. And when you see, articles on the internet, for example, people will operate under pseudonyms if they don't want to have their, I don't even really want to say privacy invaded, because privacy isn't necessarily the right terminology for the idea of kind of showing one's face on the internet. It's more like giving up a vulnerable aspect of how a person actually functions, right? So here's an example of somebody in the CIA using a pseudonym to protect themselves and their coworkers from either potential kind of backlash from their boss or potential backlash from the public. OSB was focused on what we referred to as physical access operations, a senior developer from the unit, Jeremy Weber, a pseudonym, explained. This is not dragnet mass surveillance of the kind most often associated with the NSA. So I just thought that's kind of interesting, right? Because when you move under a pseudonym, you want to still share information with your target, right? Like you still want to tell your target something that they don't currently know, or show them something that they don't currently know, but you don't necessarily want to say that you were the person who gave it up, right? So again, on the internet, it's interesting because we are in a world where the internet kind of started out as kind of like Usenet forums for people who were just uploading kind of things that were interesting to them and their hobbies. And then as the internet got faster and social media websites developed, we started moving into the world of kind of pictures and videos and parasocial relationships and identities of people on the internet who move behind their names. And it's just kind of interesting to see how that culture is continuing to evolve, and maybe even backtracking a little bit into how people are expected to act in the physical world and carry themselves with a sense of dignity and respect for others that they would do in the physical world, where when you're on the internet, you can hide behind a pseudonym, you can hide behind a username, and you can say things and do things that you wouldn't normally do as a person when your face is on the line. So what exactly is the value of face? I think mainly the face offers up vulnerability, and we can take a look at this dream example here because I think it's actually a really good example of this. So we can see in the mask on the left here that this character Dream, let me make this red. Oh, that's still too dark. So we can see that when he's wearing the mask, which actually he has a song called like "That's What the Mask Is." I don't expect people to necessarily, in my audience specifically, to know Dream or follow Dream's work, but he's a part of this Minecraft SMP, which is a group of Minecrafters who play Minecraft on the internet. And the mask does a few things for this person. It helps us kind of feel like what's going on back there. You know what I mean? It builds this kind of like tension that in music would be a kind of like a discordant note, or maybe like a setup for a release that doesn't really get released. So when you see the mask, your brain immediately sees a face, but it doesn't see a full face. And it's kind of like establishing kind of walls around this person. However, when you get to the actual face reveal of the human being and you realize that, oh, it's just a dude, it's just a guy, he's a pretty good looking dude. A lot of people on the internet were calling him ugly and kind of like, I guess, saying if you ask an AI to generate Shane Dawson, I don't know, I'm not gonna get into any of that, but when you see this man's face, you realize, oh yeah, of course he's just a person, and that opens him up to different kind of scrutiny on the internet that he wasn't scrutinized before, when he was literally masquerading as this character for a number of years on the internet. I think that the gain from showing one's face is, again, the idea of vulnerability, and more specifically connection, right? So everybody has a face. There's everybody who has a conversation with somebody has a face, and sometimes we like to keep those faces private. Sometimes we want to maintain a level of distance from others, and in the real world, the way to maintain distance from others is just to stay inside, shut your doors, move to a deserted island, be away from people. But on the internet, it's kind of different because you can still communicate with people, but you don't have to look at them, right? You in the real world, if you step out in your full dress and you kind of like go out to go and interact with society, you have a face and you're vulnerable, and people can be like, oh, this guy is being a jerk, he's being a dick, and it's like, oh, who's being a dick? It's like, oh, this guy over here, he looks like this, right? And then like people will be able to make assumptions about you. They'll be able to understand what kind of person that you are, and can assume that the person, kind of like in the Atticus Finch, with Atticus Finch's character being called into question into Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus Finch is the same in his house as he is on the public streets, right? I don't remember the actual quote from Atticus Finch himself in the book, because it's been a number of years since I've read it, but the generalized concept is that who you are in private and who you are in public might be a different person. You might be able to put on a different face, or of course the word facade, which, if you know the definition of facade, or the second definition of facade that has present to its buildings is an outward appearance that is maintained to conceal a less pleasant or credible reality, right? Or the facade of a building too, right? You look at a nice front of a building and you open it up and it's filled with trash, for example. So I think that these face reveals are interesting because Dream here was operating under a facade. He was different in the streets than he was at home by definition, because when he was at home, he was probably not wearing this mask, because what would be the point of wearing a mask if you were just by yourself? But in the streets, he was operating as two separate people, right? So there was a dissonance there. There was the Dream that would go out as his real name. I don't actually know his real name. Would go to like the store or the movies with his friends and like pick up eggs and milk from a cashier who might have been like, let's say, for example, a major Dream fan, right? And then he would go to public events as Dream wearing this mask, and people be like, who is he? He's so mysterious. He's so kind of suave. Like I want to understand more about this person behind the mask. And I think it's that lack of information that really gets to people. It's the lack of information that doesn't allow them to make a connection with you. And the connection on the internet, in my opinion, is both a pro and a con. I, for example, use the head of Lita everywhere on pretty much all of my online presences. In fact, I actually wrote a whole blog post about why I use the head of Lita everywhere. And initially, when I was writing, I didn't have much use for my face, right? Like my face wasn't really an asset that improved the scope or the impact of the blogs that I was writing. But when I transitioned more into working into the video space, I was like, oh yeah, being faceless has value, but for the work that I'm trying to do, there's a lot of connection that I'd be missing out on the audience without showing my face. So I don't think that it's wrong on the internet to be pseudonymous, because if anything, it's kind of like a game theory leveling out where certain people will take advantage of the fact that you're showing your face and they're not showing their face and deliver harm to you and basically get away with it, right? Because there's no way to really kind of like equalize the playing field of people who can operate in a way where they can be uncouth, for example. However, again, there are downsides. There's downsides to pseudonymity. You don't really get to form that connection with people. And I think really being able to form connection with people that you can't see is one of the main value adds of the internet, right? You can only have so many in-person, face-to-face conversations with people. So being able to have a quote unquote conversation throughout the interspace of the internet and still be able to get across your facial features, the attractive parts of a person's face and the flaws of a person's face goes a long way in helping bridge that gap of connection. The final point that I want to talk about has to do with strangers kind of like coming up to people, being recognized in public, etc. So I want to talk about fame, because I think that you're only really famous if people in the room know you, right? So fame is a function of everybody else in the room outside of you, right? So it's not like you are famous and you walk around and your fame sticks to your character. In fact, fame is what everybody else thinks of you. You're either known by the other people in the room or you're not known by the other people in the room. And when you share your face on the internet, you become more famous in the sense that more people will see your face, in the sense that more people will recognize you, because as we said up here, humans are obsessed with faces, right? From a very young age, from being a baby, basically, people will automatically recognize faces and it'll just stick out to people. So if you have fame in public by showing your face, it just means that you're more recognizable than a person who doesn't show their face on the internet, right? In the same way that you're recognized amongst your family and friends. So I think that that's kind of interesting because, you know, this is also a pro and a con, because if people know you and you don't know them, they have an information advantage on you. And not saying that things in life are generally zero sum enough to cause issue for people to kind of want to bring harm to others. And most people are really nice people and genuinely just want to come up and take pictures with people or just say hello. I think it does need to be said that that information imbalance does cause the parasocial relationships that we're starting to see in this current generation of social media, where people have online profiles and people can find out where people live and swat them and do stuff like that. So the last point I want to talk about is some maybe open questions / future research for this space, because of course I think that this is a conversation about face reveals, and obviously one of the things that I want to get across with this format is that I don't know everything and that these knowledge things aren't closed, right? So a lot of the things that I'm saying can change in the future and might change with more or less data, and showing the boundaries of my argument I think is important, and the internet doesn't do that enough in general. So the first thing I want to talk about is VTubers, right? So VTubers are now becoming a bit more of a popular concept. The concept of a VTuber is a person who uses a virtual avatar to project on the internet. And this is interesting because it is, I think, informationally satisfying to the human mind, right? Like this person is very attractive, they have very nice features, a nice jawline, everything is there, right? Like there's nothing that's hidden about this face, except that of course it's not the real person's face. Like this person is mapping the points on their face to match their emotional state, and then those emotions and the mouth movements and the eye movements are being tracked onto this online character. So you could literally see, like if I go into full screen here, that you have different points on your face that can be tracked by different apps and such that basically use machine learning to monitor the movement of those points. So VTubing is interesting, right? Because it basically is this kind of concept of like in the future, maybe you can just get old and you don't need to continue to show your face. I think that I wrote about that in the blog post that I mentioned here. And I thought that that was a really good point, actually. You know, like why should you show your face on the internet if you're just going to get older? Like you need to, you have to get older regardless, but do you have to share that, for example? Especially if you don't want to share that. So I think that VTubing is a good way to escape that while still capturing a lot of the value of having a face on the internet. You still, of course, lose the connection that you would get from and the vulnerability from showing your real face, but that again is kind of a pro in the kind of like zero sum aspects. So then the next thing I want to talk about is like choosing to not show your face on the internet forever, right? So I think that like when you show your face on the internet, you can't really take that back, depending on like like Dream can't unring that bell now that he's like shown his face to his millions of fans, and everyone's going to know what he looks like. And I think that there are some people who will choose to stay pseudonymous forever. And I think that that works depending on kind of like what your goals are on the internet, and particularly your economic financial goals on the internet, and kind of like what kind of audience you're trying to reach. I do again think that there's a lot of value in operating with the same way that you might in public, kind of like the Atticus Finch style thing that we were just talking about. When you face record, I think the problem of the internet is that it does, at least the internet that I traipse around on YouTube, is that it does tend to just try and really blow things out of proportion and really kind of make things more entertaining than they would be in the real world. And you kind of have to, because you have to keep people engaged and interested to have them continue to watch. But I don't think that that's necessarily true too. So that I think that decreases the value of a face over time, because you keep having to raise the intensity to stay relevant. And at a certain point, the human body and mind just can't keep up with the pressure that you're putting on it externally. So I think that choosing not to show your face on the internet forever to keep that pressure low is also a really good idea. And then the third part that I wanted to talk about is that taking pictures in a world of augmented reality. So we are kind of moving more into a world where there's going to be more AR apps, for example, Snapchat's AR camera. So there's no doubt that this form of media, of AR media, is going to become more and more popular with time. And as that becomes more and more popular, we're going to start to see people augmenting their realities in a way that they couldn't before. And that'll be interesting. I don't really know how that's going to play out. I think that in a lot of ways, that'll change again the dynamic of how people need to understand faces to trust somebody, and it'll change the whole vulnerability connection thing yet again. So we live in an interesting time. We live in a time where the face has changed so much in the past 30 years because now people can choose to hide their faces where they didn't really have an option in human history before. If you wanted to disseminate information, of course you could do it through books and through the printing press, but now the mediums have expanded to audio and video as well, which allows for people to do a lot more than they could accomplish with just text, for example. So we do live in a current era of kind of showing who you are, either intentionally or accidentally. Well, some people will just screw up and they'll just accidentally reveal their face on stream when they didn't mean to. And then we talked a little bit about how that changes the safety aspects of a person's life in a game theory kind of way. The value of being pseudonymous, the value of being vulnerable, which is the opposite. You could almost see them as two sides of a spectrum amongst strangers, and what that means about being recognized in public. So that's the video. Thanks for watching. I'm recording this one not live on stream because I wanted to try a few of these off stream and see how I felt. I feel a little bit more awkward talking to the camera when I'm not streaming, funnily enough, but I think that I got there. So the beginning was a little bit rough, but now what I can say is to like and subscribe. I can't really say that on Twitch because it doesn't really make sense on Twitch to just stop your stream to say like and subscribe. But since I'm just recording this video, please shoot it a like and subscribe if you're interested in following content that looks like this. I do deep dives once every couple days on topics that I find to be interesting, and they're really all over the place. And we'll usually use Obsidian and Excalibur to get our point across. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.